reports going viral.
It's possible it was hijacked. We don't know.
A plane vanished from radar without a trace, only to reappear 40 years later as if nothing had happened. The crew and pilot were stunned, utterly confused by what seemed like a journey through time. Yet, in the world of aviation, this was just the beginning of a series of strange and shocking events. Get ready to uncover 8 of the most astonishing and unbelievable incidents in transportation history. Number 8. The Vanishing and Reappearing Flight, PanAm Flight 914. For years, the tale of PanAm Flight 914 has fascinated many, sparking endless curiosity and wonder. This mysterious story about the sudden disappearance and surprising reappearance of an airplane has fueled countless conversations, debates, and wild theories. Yet, the truth behind this puzzling event remains hard to find, leaving us with more questions than answers. The story begins on July 2nd, 1955. PanAm Flight 914, a large Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, took off from New York City, heading for the sunny skies of Miami, with a brief stop planned in Charleston, West Virginia. The flight was led by Captain Charles G. Taylor, with First Officer Eugene Propp by his side. Along with them were 4 flight attendants and 57 passengers. About 80 minutes after takeoff, as the plane flew over the Atlantic Ocean, the pilot contacted air traffic control, reporting problems with the plane's instruments. That was the last anyone heard from Flight 914. When the plane didn't arrive in Miami, a large search operation was launched, but neither the plane nor its passengers were ever found. Then, something truly strange happened. In 1992, though some say it was 1985 or even 1993, a man claiming to be Captain Charles Taylor contacted air traffic control, asking for landing instructions at Miami International Airport. He reported that the flight had experienced navigation problems, but had kept flying until they finally found their way back. When the plane landed, the crew and passengers got off, completely unaware that more than 30 years had passed. The airport staff was shocked when they checked the flight number and discovered that PanAm Flight 914 had vanished without a trace back in 1955. This confusing event has led to a wide range of theories and guesses. One of the most popular ideas is that the plane somehow flew through a time warp, traveling through time. Although this idea is interesting, it's just a guess and lacks any scientific proof. Other theories suggest even more far-fetched possibilities, such as secret government experiments or even alien involvement. But like the time travel theory, these ideas also lack solid proof and are often dismissed. More simple explanations, like navigation errors, mechanical failures, or human mistakes, have also been considered. Despite careful investigations, authorities have been unable to provide a good explanation for how this plane could disappear and then reappear more than 3 decades later. What makes the mystery even more confusing is that the crew and passengers hadn't aged a single day, adding another layer to this already puzzling mystery. PanAm confirmed that these crew members were indeed their employees scheduled to fly in 1955, but they had no explanation for the strange incident. The mysterious case of PanAm Flight 914 has left a lasting impact on popular culture, inspiring books, movies, and TV shows. It has sparked a deep interest in mysteries and the unknown, capturing the imaginations of people for generations. The strange story of PanAm Flight 914 remains one of aviation's most interesting mysteries. While theories are everywhere, there is still no clear explanation for what happened to the ill-fated plane and its passengers during those missing years. The fact that the crew and passengers showed no signs of aging only adds to the mystery. Though the truth behind this incident may never be fully known, the legend of PanAm Flight 914 will continue to fascinate and intrigue curious minds for generations to come. However, it's important to note that the story of PanAm Flight 914 is a fictional tale that first appeared in Weekly World News, a tabloid known for publishing wildly imaginative and fictional stories. The legend of PanAm Flight 914 didn't begin at a New York airport in 1955, but with an article published 3 decades later. The story is similar to a 1961 episode of the sci-fi show The Twilight Zone, titled The Odyssey of Flight 33. Despite its fictional roots, the story continues to attract audiences with its mix of mystery and intrigue. Number 7. The Bermuda Triangle's most puzzling disappearance. Flight 19. On December 5th, 1945, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers soared into the sky from the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. These planes, part of a group called Flight 19, were on a simple 3-hour training mission known as Navigation Problem Number 1. Their path was straightforward. First, they would head east to a bombing practice area known as Hens and Chickens Shoals. After completing their task, they would turn north towards Grand Bahama Island and then make a final turn southwest, returning safely to base. Each bomber carried a crew of 3 Navy men or Marines, except for one plane that had only 2. These men were no rookies. They had each logged around 3 hours of flying time. Leading them was Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a seasoned pilot who had seen combat in World War II, flying many missions over the Pacific. At first, everything went as planned for Flight 19, just like the many flights before them that day. They reached Hens and Chickens Shoals by 2:30 p.m. and dropped their practice bombs without a hitch. But soon after they turned north, things started to go awry. For reasons no one could explain, Lieutenant Taylor began to suspect that his compass was malfunctioning and that they were flying in the wrong direction. The situation grew worse when a storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and thick clouds. Suddenly, Flight 19 was hopelessly lost. "I don't know where we are," one pilot radioed, clearly distressed. "We must have gotten lost after that last turn." Lieutenant Robert F. Cox, another Navy flight instructor flying nearby, overheard their calls for help. He immediately contacted the air station and asked if Flight 19 needed assistance. "Both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida," Taylor replied, his voice filled with worry. "I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down." This was baffling. Taylor had flown over the Bahamas less than an hour ago, but now he thought they had somehow drifted hundreds of miles off course into the Florida Keys. Taylor had recently transferred from Miami to Fort Lauderdale, leading some to believe he might have confused some Bahama Islands for the Keys. Normally, pilots lost over the Atlantic were supposed to fly west, using the setting sun to guide them back to the mainland. But Taylor believed they were over the Gulf of Mexico. Desperate to find land, he decided to turn Flight 19 northeast, unknowingly leading them further out to sea. Some of the other pilots realized this was a mistake. "Damn it," one of them said over the radio. "If we would just fly west, we would get home." Eventually, Taylor agreed to turn west, but just after 6 p.m., he changed his mind again, ordering the planes to head east once more. "We didn't go far enough east," he insisted, still fearing they might be in the Gulf. His men likely protested. Some even think one plane broke away to head in a different direction, but most followed Taylor's lead. As Flight 19 continued to drift further into the vast ocean, their radio signals grew weaker. With fuel running dangerously low, Taylor finally told his men to prepare for a possible crash landing in the water. "All planes close up tight," he ordered. "We'll have to ditch unless we reach land. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." A few minutes later, the only sound left on the radio was static. The Navy wasted no time in launching search planes to find the missing flight. At 7:30 p.m., 2 PBM Mariner flying boats took off from an air station north of Fort Lauderdale. But just 20 minutes later, one of the Mariners vanished from the radar, much like Flight 19. That plane and its 13 crew members were never found, though it's believed the plane exploded shortly after takeoff. Mariners had a reputation for being accident-prone, earning them the nickname "flying gas tanks" due to their tendency to catch fire. A nearby ship reported seeing a fireball and found an oil slick on the ocean's surface, suggesting the Mariner had gone up in flames. At dawn the next day, the Navy sent out over 300 boats and planes to search for Flight 19 and the missing Mariner. For 5 days, they combed through more than 300,000 square miles of ocean and land, but found nothing. They just vanished," said Navy Lieutenant David White. "We had hundreds of planes out looking, and we searched over land and water for days, and nobody ever found the bodies or any debris." The Navy's investigation ended in frustration. They speculated that Taylor might have confused the Bahamas with the Florida Keys after his compass failed, but they couldn't explain how Flight 19 became so lost. In the end, the Navy blamed it on causes or reasons unknown. The mysterious disappearance of Flight 19 on December 5, 1945, has given rise to countless theories. During the 1960s and 1970s, writers like Vincent Gaddis and Charles Berlitz popularized the idea that the flight was swallowed by the Bermuda Triangle, a notorious area of the Atlantic Ocean supposedly known for strange disappearances and mechanical failures. Some stories and films have even suggested that magnetic anomalies, parallel dimensions, or alien abductions played a role. The 1977 movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind famously depicted Flight 19 as being taken by UFOs and later found in the deserts of Mexico. Even if there was nothing supernatural about the lost patrol, its disappearance remains a puzzle. One of the strangest details involves Lieutenant Taylor. Witnesses say he arrived late to the pre-flight briefing and asked to be excused from leading the mission. "I just don't want to take this one out," he supposedly said. Why Taylor tried to avoid the mission is still unknown, leading some to think that he might not have been in the right state of mind. Another mystery is why none of Flight 19's crew used their rescue radios or ZBX receivers, which could have guided them back to land. They were instructed to turn the devices on, but either they didn't hear the order or didn't acknowledge it. To this day, no one knows what happened to Flight 19. The most likely explanation is that the planes ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean, leaving any survivors to face the treacherous waters. In 1991, a group of treasure hunters thought they had finally solved the mystery when they found the remains of 5 World War II-era Avengers near Fort Lauderdale. But it turned out, these planes belonged to a different group, not the famous Lost Patrol. Many believe that the wrecks of Flight 19 and the Mariner still lie somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle. But despite ongoing searches, no trace of the 6 planes or their 27 crew members has ever been found. Number 6. The unsolved case of D.B. Cooper. On Wednesday, November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man using the name Dan Cooper bought a $20 ticket from Northwest Airlines. The flight was from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. At that time, buying tickets did not require any form of identification, and passengers could board with weapons or explosives without being checked, much like boarding a bus. The man, who was probably using a fake name and later became known as D.B. Cooper, was in his mid-40s and dressed in a black suit with a long coat, brown shoes, a white shirt, and a black tie. He carried a suitcase and a small paper bag. Once on board, he took a seat at the back of the plane, lit a cigarette, and ordered a bourbon. At nearly 3 p.m., the plane took off without incident until Cooper made his move. He handed a flight attendant a note. She initially thought it was a flirtatious message and ignored it, but Cooper's insistence led her to read it. The note revealed that he had a bomb and wanted her to sit next to him. Cooper showed her what looked like a bomb and then outlined his demands in a note: $200,000 in cash, a fuel truck, and 4 parachutes. Cooper planned to refuel the plane upon landing and then take off again in a different direction. The 4 parachutes were a clever tactic to confuse the FBI into thinking he might have forced someone else to jump with him. The flight attendant relayed Cooper's demands to the captain, who informed the airline and authorities. The plane circled above Seattle for about 3 hours, while the FBI prepared the ransom. The passengers were kept in the dark, with the captain attributing the delay to a minor airport issue. When the plane finally landed, Cooper's demands were met. He received the money and the parachutes, and the plane was refueled. He released all the passengers, but kept the flight crew on board. Cooper then ordered the pilot to fly to Mexico at 10,000 feet with the landing gear down. The FBI sent 2 jets to follow the plane. Due to the evening darkness and rain, Cooper likely knew he was being pursued, but it was difficult to spot the jets. At around 8 p.m., Cooper instructed the flight attendants to join the pilot in the cockpit, leaving him alone in the rear. Shortly after, the plane's rear stairway door opened, and the crew realized Cooper had jumped. The plane landed safely, but Cooper was gone, leaving behind only a black tie. The FBI thoroughly searched the plane but found no additional clues. Cooper had leaped into a forested area between Seattle and Reno, Nevada. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no trace of him was ever found. In 1980, a young boy discovered bundles of money matching the ransom in a riverbank, but this discovery was miles from the drop zone and didn't offer much insight into Cooper's fate. Over the years, the FBI investigated numerous suspects, but found no conclusive evidence linking anyone to Cooper. Among the suspects were Richard Floyd McCoy, who hijacked a similar plane but made several mistakes and was quickly arrested. Duane Weber, who claimed to be Cooper on his deathbed but lacked solid proof. Kenneth Christensen, whose physical description and circumstances made him a suspect, but who did not match the height and parachute choice. And Robert Rackstraw, a former helicopter pilot with motive and skill, but no conclusive evidence linking him to the hijacking. The prevailing theory suggests that Cooper didn't survive his jump. The parachutes he chose were subpar, and the weather conditions were harsh. It's believed that he may have fallen into a river, drowned, and was carried away. This would explain the absence of his body or other traces, as the river could have carried him into the Pacific Ocean. Additionally, the FBI discovered rare chemicals on Cooper's tie that matched those used in Boeing factories, hinting that he might have had a connection to the aircraft manufacturer. However, this clue did not provide a definite answer. In 2016, the FBI officially closed the case, leaving the mystery of D.B. Cooper's disappearance unresolved. Number 5. The Stolen Boeing 727. On the evening of May 25, 2003, a Boeing 727 unexpectedly took off from Quatro de Fevereiro International Airport in Luanda, Angola. This flight wasn't scheduled, and the plane, with the tail number 844AAA, had no flight plan filed. Air traffic control tried to reach the plane as it took off erratically down the runway, but received no response. The 727 departed with its lights off and its transponder turned off. The two men on board, who had been working on restoring the aircraft, were never seen again. The 727 had originally belonged to American Airlines, flying for them for over 25 years before being sold to Aerospace Sales and Leasing in Miami, Florida, in January 2002. Although it was retired due to American Airlines maintenance protocols, it was still in good shape. Keith Urban Irwin, a 57-year-old entrepreneur from South Africa, was interested in buying the plane. Irwin had recently partnered with Cargo Air Transport Systems, a South African company contracted to transport fuel to diamond mines in Angola. Due to the ongoing civil war in Angola, land transportation was nearly impossible, making air transport a risky but preferable option. Irwin initially intended to lease a 727 and hire 2 flight crews for a year, but lost $140,000 when that deal fell through. He then met with Mary Joseph, the owner of Aerospace Sales and Leasing, who offered him a choice of 3 retired 727s. Irwin decided to purchase one for $1 million, with Joseph agreeing to remove the passenger seats to make room for fuel tanks. Irwin paid a $120,000 down payment and was to pay the remainder within 30 days. Joseph sent one of his employees, Mike Gabriel, along with 6 crew members to ensure payment. The plane left Miami on February 28, 2022, but did not arrive in Angola until March 14th. Irwin and his partners had failed to get the necessary landing permits, leading to a 2-week delay. During this time, Irwin spent the remaining $185,000 from the venture. The conditions for the crew in Luanda were harsh, with no clean water or electricity, and their passports were taken by the company. 2 of the 6 crew members flew back to the U.S. without their salaries, while the other 4 stayed, hoping for payment and to start flights. Irwin lost his partner, Cargo Air Transport Systems, and had to find new investors. By April 2003, the 727 began making delivery flights, but conditions were risky. A crew member described the flights as the most dangerous in the world, with unpaved and uneven runways leading to frequent crashes. By the end of April, all the crew members had returned to the U.S., and Irwin's venture collapsed. In May 2002, Irwin believed he was being followed and took precautions to secure his hotel room. The following day, he left Angola, leaving the 727 behind. The plane, in poor condition after only 17 flights, was parked in Luanda, accruing fees. Irwin made 2 payments towards the $1 million owed, then stopped. Joseph fired Mike Gabriel and in November 2002, traveled to Nigeria with another 727 to sell. He brought Ben Charles Padilla, a skilled aircraft mechanic, to help with the sale and repair of the 727. In May 2003, Padilla and John Mouton, a worker from the Republic of the Congo, conducted a systems check on the plane. During this check, the plane mysteriously took off and vanished, along with Padilla and Mouton. The next day, Joseph received an angry call from Air Gemini in Johannesburg, demanding to know why the plane left ahead of schedule. Joseph reported the plane stolen to the U.S. Embassy, which prompted an investigation. Given the plane's disappearance shortly after 9/11, American intelligence agencies took an interest, but only the FBI and State Department conducted official investigations. The FBI ended their investigation in 2025. While theories about the plane being stolen for parts, smuggling, or insurance fraud circulated, Joseph had a history of questionable business practices and had faced legal issues in the past. Despite Joseph's and Padilla's denials of involvement, the plane's disappearance remains unexplained. The plane's disappearance and the missing crew members remain a mystery. There have been various theories and alleged sightings, but none have been confirmed. The most plausible explanation is that the plane crashed in a remote area, but the reason for its sudden takeoff and disappearance remains unanswered. No sightings of Ben Padilla or John Mouton have been reported, and their fates remain unknown. Number 3. The fall and survival of Vesna Vulović. One of the most incredible stories in aviation is about Vesna Vulović, a 22-year-old flight attendant who became famous in her homeland, Yugoslavia, due to an astonishing set of events on January 26, 1972. She was working on Yugoslav Airlines Flight 367 that day, and little did she know her life was about to change forever. Flight 367, operated by Yugoslav Airlines, took off from Stockholm, Sweden, heading to Belgrade, now part of Serbia. The flight was scheduled to stop in Copenhagen and Zagreb. While the first leg of the journey went smoothly, it was the segment from Copenhagen to Zagreb that would lead to disaster. On board was the Douglas DC-9 aircraft, flown by Captain Ludwig Rustria and First Officer Radko Mihic. The plane had 23 passengers and 3 flight attendants, including Vesna Vulović. She was on this flight due to a mix-up with another attendant with a similar name. Despite her young age, Vulović was well-traveled, having studied in England and lived in Sweden before becoming a flight attendant. The flight began normally, climbing to 33 feet. However, about 45 minutes into the journey, a devastating explosion ripped apart the nose of the aircraft. This explosion caused the cabin to depressurize suddenly, making it nearly impossible for anyone to breathe at such a high altitude. As the plane descended, the wreckage was scattered across a snowy wooded area in what was then Czechoslovakia, now part of the Czech Republic. While the wreckage was extensive and all other passengers and crew perished, Vesna Vulović was found alive amidst the debris. She was severely injured, with a brain hemorrhage, fractured skull, broken legs, and other severe injuries, but she survived. She was discovered by a former World War II medic, taken to a hospital in Prague, and remained in a coma for weeks. When she awoke, she had no memory of the crash, only recalling her last moments at Copenhagen Airport. It's believed that she survived because she was moving about the cabin when the explosion happened, and a cabin trolley might have helped to keep her from being ejected from the fuselage. The snowy terrain might have also softened the impact. To this day, Vesna Vulović holds the record for surviving the longest fall without a parachute. The crash is suspected to have been caused by a bomb planted by Croatian nationalists. The terrorists who planted the bomb checked in a briefcase in Stockholm, then left the plane during the stop in Copenhagen. The bomb was hidden in the plane's cargo hold, and the attack is thought to have been part of a series of terrorist actions against Yugoslavia. The exact identity of the terrorists remains unknown. However, on the day after the bombing, a man claiming to be a Croatian nationalist took responsibility for the attack. Despite various theories and political instability, no arrests were ever made. Vulović recovered from her injuries and returned to work, although she later took a desk job with Yugoslav Airlines. Her story was widely reported, but political tensions in Yugoslavia led to misinformation and smear campaigns against her. Despite these challenges, she lived until the age of 66, passing away in 2016. Number 2. The stowaway who survived against all odds, Yahya Abdi. A 15-year-old boy who managed to survive an extraordinary flight to Hawaii as a stowaway said he picked the closest flight going west in hopes of finding his birth mother, and is amazed that he made it through the journey. Yahya Abdi recently shared his incredible story during a Google chat with KPIX5. He talked about how he survived a 5.5-hour flight from San Jose to Maui back in April. This was his first time speaking publicly about the event, which was covered in the news on Tuesday night. Yahya, who moved from Somalia, had run away from his home in Santa Clara. He climbed over a fence at Mineta San Jose International Airport and hid in the wheel well of a Hawaiian Airlines plane. He remembered covering his ears when the plane took off. It was above the clouds, and I could see through the small holes, Yahya said. Despite the cold and low oxygen at 35,000 feet, Yahya managed to survive. Video footage from Maui's airport shows him dropping onto the runway about an hour after the plane landed. He chose to board the plane because he didn't want to stay with his stepmother and was determined to find his mother in Africa, whom he hadn't seen since he was 7. Yahya spoke with his mother, Uba Mohammed Abdullah, on the phone. "I want her to come live with me in America," he said. Uba confirmed the call, telling the Associated Press that Yahya was overwhelmed, asking, "Mom, are you alive? I thought you died in a boat accident. This is amazing." After a moment, he broke down in tears. Currently, Yahya is staying in a temporary foster home. He will begin his junior year of high school this fall and plans to move in with his aunt in Minneapolis. According to KPIX5, Yahya has been enjoying typical teenage activities like going to the movies and playing video games. Earlier this year, police considered possible charges for his airport fence climb, and Child Protective Services have been involved. The Santa Clara County Public Defender's Office is helping Yahya, though details are kept private due to juvenile confidentiality rules. Number 1. The ghost ship, the Mary Celeste. On December 5, 1872, about 400 miles east of the Azores, a British brigantine called the De Gratia came across a strange scene that became one of the biggest maritime mysteries ever. Captain David Morehouse and his crew saw a ship drifting aimlessly in the rough sea. To their surprise, it was the Mary Celeste, which had left New York City just 8 days before, heading to Genoa, Italy. Shocked, Captain Morehouse decided to change his course to help the abandoned vessel. When Captain Morehouse and his crew boarded the Mary Celeste, they were met with an unsettling sight. The ship's navigation charts were scattered everywhere, and the crew's personal belongings were left behind in their cabins. The ship's only lifeboat was missing, and one of the 2 pumps was taken apart. Water had risen 3.5 feet inside the hull, but the cargo of 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol was mostly untouched. Despite having plenty of food and water, there was no trace of the ship's 10 passengers. This discovery started an intriguing mystery about what had happened to the Mary Celeste's crew. Over time, various theories emerged. Some suggested that mutiny or pirate attacks might have happened, while others proposed stranger ideas like sea monsters or dangerous waterspouts. Modern investigations with advanced maritime technology have even added new theories about the crew's fate. The Mary Celeste had started its unlucky voyage on November 7, 1872. Aboard were Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 men. They faced harsh weather for nearly 2 weeks and were near the Azores, as noted in the ship's log on November 25th at 5 a.m. After finding the Mary Celeste, the De Gratia crew towed it about 800 miles to Gibraltar. A British court investigated to determine if the De Gratia crew deserved compensation from the ship's insurers. Although the court found no wrongdoing after 3 months, the De Gratia crew received only 1/6 of the $46,000 insurance claim, raising doubts about the thoroughness of the investigation. The ship was intact and its cargo was untouched, which seemed odd if pirates were involved. One theory from the 19th century suggested that the crew might have turned on each other after drinking the alcohol, but this was later dismissed. Another idea was that expanding alcohol vapors might have made the crew fear an explosion, leading them to abandon the ship. However, the De Gratia crew found no signs of fumes, and all the hatches were closed, making this theory less likely. Abandoning a ship at sea is usually a last resort. Experts now think that Captain Briggs, a respected sailor, might have ordered the abandonment due to severe weather, faulty equipment, and rising water levels. The ship's log from November 25th showed they were close to Santa Maria Island in the Azores, but by the time the De Gratia found them, they were 400 miles away from the island. This suggests that the crew may have left the ship after the last log entry. Despite the rough weather and equipment issues, researchers believe these alone might not explain the crew's disappearance. The crew was never seen again, and the true reason for their disappearance remains a mystery. Which of these shocking events did you find the most interesting? Let us know your answer in the comments section. Number 4. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart, often called the Babe of the Sky, was born on July 24, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas. She became one of the most well-known pilots in the world. Notably, she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, both as a passenger and later as a solo pilot, among her many achievements and records. However, her famous life took a mysterious turn in July 1937, during her second attempt to become the first woman to fly around the world. In March 1937, Amelia's first attempt to fly around the globe ended quickly due to various problems. She, along with navigators Fred Noonan and Harry Manning, flew from Oakland, California to Honolulu, Hawaii. However, a blown tire or pilot error stopped their journey during takeoff from Honolulu. When Amelia and Fred tried again 2 months later, Harry Manning chose not to join them, citing the issues they faced on their initial attempt. On May 21, 1937, Amelia and Fred took off in their Lockheed 10 Electra, packed with 1,000 pounds of fuel, aiming for Miami, Florida. Their journey initially went well as they stopped for fuel in South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. After 42 days and 2,000 miles, they reached New Guinea, with only 7,000 miles left to complete their record-setting trip. On July 2, 1937, they set off for Howland Island, planning a refueling stop after 8 hours of flight. As Amelia and Fred flew, they faced stronger than expected headwinds, which they tried to manage. Back in New Guinea, radio operator Harry Belfort tried to warn them about the tough conditions, but Amelia didn't respond to his messages. Around 2:18 p.m., Amelia sent a message saying she was flying at 140 knots and 7,000 feet. But an hour later, she reported climbing to 10,000 feet, possibly to avoid dense clouds. As time passed, Amelia's transmissions became clearer, suggesting they were nearing Howland Island. The Coast Guard ship Itasca, waiting near the island, struggled to communicate with Amelia and Fred. They asked for Morse code, but that didn't work either. Amelia's final distress call came at 8:43 a.m. "We are on line 157337. We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." This message was never repeated. Despite an intense search effort by the Itasca, the U.S. battleship Colorado, and the USS Lexington, neither Amelia, Fred, nor the Electra was found. The most accepted theory is that the plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Amelia's final communications hinted at low fuel, and the headwinds and altitude climb likely contributed to the aircraft's fuel depletion. Some believe Amelia and Fred might have tried to land on Gardner Island, now Nikumaroro, about 350 nautical miles south of Howland Island. Although the island appeared uninhabited, the Navy saw signs of recent human activity, suggesting Amelia and Fred might have lived as castaways. However, no plane wreckage was found. In the days following their disappearance, people claimed to have heard radio calls from Amelia, with a confused voice in the background. These transmissions were traced back to Gardner Island, but the Coast Guard dismissed them. In 1939 or 1940, British officer Gerald Gallagher discovered a partial skeleton on Nikumaroro, but it was later identified as belonging to a male, not Amelia or Fred. Recent investigations suggest the bones could belong to a tall woman, possibly Amelia. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery-TIGHAR- proposes that coconut crabs might have scattered or eaten some of the remains. Despite various theories, there is no clear proof about what happened to Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan.